Hello and welcome everyone to the Two Mats and the Jeff podcast. We're just a couple of guys talking sports here. So our episode today is all about the greatest NFL coaches of all time. So we have our list done of who we think are the greatest coaches. I'm going to start with my list, starting with our number 5. So the 5th best coach of all time, according to me, and my research, is Joe Gibbs. So I put him down as number 5, Washington head coach from 81 to 92, and then again 2004 to 2007. 16 years of coaching. He was 154 and 94, which is a 62% winning percentage. 17 and 7 in the playoffs, 3-time Super Bowl champ, Hall of Fame, 1996. 3 Super Bowls. This is one of his distinctions, I think, is 3 Super Bowls with 3 different quarterbacks. Yeah. And many of you listening and watching might not even know these guys because he had nobody, really. He had Doug Williams, Joe Theismann, okay, you might know Joe Theismann, and Mark Rippon. These are not, at least 2 of the 3, are not big names that are showing up anywhere on anyone's list of quarterbacks, that's for sure. So that's my number 5 best coach in the NFL.
Yeah, sure, okay. So my number 5 is Bill Walsh, coach of the 49ers, Hall of Famer, 79 to 88, about 10 years, I believe. The reason he made it to number 5 for me, he won 3 Super Bowls with the Niners or whatever, but the reason he made my top 5 and wasn't just honorable mention is because he's basically the inventor of the West Coast offense and the impact of that on the game. It's changed. It's still being used somewhat today, not as extensively as it was in the 80s, 90s, and aughts or whatever. But I just think because of that, the impact on the game is why he made 5 for me. If he would have coached longer and maybe won a couple more Super Bowls with the Niners, he might have been higher. But for me, he's my 5.
Well. He was my 5 too. I was just going to say, you took my thunder there and actually said everything I was going to say. The 3 Super Bowl, and I said the West Coast offense, and I said a lot of coaches were still doing, Andy Reid in the Super Bowl, and he did, he does a very good form of West Coast offense. Hall of Famer, as you mentioned, and but I also want to mention Joe Gibbs was one of my honorable mentions. So
mine as well.
Yes.
All right, so I guess we would push everything down a little bit because I put Bill Walsh as my number 4. So you covered everything, but I agree, only 10 years.
Yeah.
So not quite as long as some other guys, and I think longevity played into some of my thinking when thinking about best coaches of all time. Because if you just had 2 or 3 or 4 good years, that doesn't make you an all-timer. 10 years compared to some of the other guys, 16 years for Joe Gibbs was my 5. But all the things you mentioned already was what kicked him up to a little.
Well, I was going to say, does anybody know why he only did 10 years?
Well, that's what I was going to say. I think he burned out. I think he was burnt out, and George Seifert took over a dynasty basically.
Right. So he pulled a George Costanza. Thank you and good night. He left on a high note, which there's nothing wrong with that. In some ways, you wish some coaches would do that before they decline too much, and it kind of sullies them a little bit in the whole history of the sport. So, there's my 4. What do you have for your 4?
My 4 is Chuck Noll. So Chuck Noll, 69 to 91, 23 years, Hall of Famer. Biggest thing about Chuck Noll is 4-0 in the Super Bowl. 4-0 in the Super Bowl, 4 in 6 years. So to me, that's a huge. Some other coaches might have more or whatever, but the undefeated, sort of like MJ basketball, undefeated in the Super Bowl, and the 4 in the 6 years. I think it was 209, 156 and 1 or so. And another thing with the Steelers and Chuck Noll was the way they built that team through the draft. That just doesn't happen anymore. There wasn't as much free agency, or I don't know how much free agency, if any, there was back then. I'm old, but not that old that I can remember what the free agency process was in the 70s, the late 70s.
A lot different than today, I can guarantee you that.
Totally
I don't know exactly either, but a lot different. Guys didn't go out back then and do what they do today to try to put together and get together with teams or say, I'm not going to play free anymore because I don't like this. Yeah. I don't think that happened in the 70s.
No, it just didn't happen or whatever, except for when the World Football League came in and guys left for that for a little bit or whatever. But anyway, just through the draft is one thing I remember with Chuck Noll.
Well, I was going to say, we those of you listening, we do our own lists.
Yeah.
But yeah, my number 4 is Chuck Noll as well. 193 and 148. He was 16 and 8 in the playoffs. Again, I wrote the four Super Bowl wins. I also rated right here. Great draft picks is the thing I read. That's the one thing I read about. Hall of Fame coach. I mean, all of these guys are going to be Hall of Fame coaches. But if you think about, I mean, those of you, if this is your first time, we are Eagles fans in this area. So, we kind of get jealous of Steelers. I know where I do. But you think about the Steelers, I mean, they've had lots of great coaches. I mean, there wasn't very many of them because they stay because they're so good. That's what I mean.
Noel, Cowher,
right.
and
That's
Tomlin.
what I meant. Like, I mean, think about that. That's just crazy to think, But yes, I had Chuck Noll as my number 4. So.
Yeah, we're gonna have the Eagles. Will have 3 coaches in less than 10 years coming up here soon. So, all right. So my number 3, and this is really was a tricky one for me because I hate this guy. I really do. It was Bill Belichick, and so he's a cheater, but I also think he only cheated himself so far. And again, longevity played into it. 25 years. Now, he didn't have a whole lot of success in Cleveland. He actually had no real success in Cleveland. But you can't deny, the success that the New England Patriots have had. And he has 68% win percentage, 273 and 127, 31 and 12 in the playoffs, 6 Super Bowl championships, 11 more playoff wins than anybody else as a coach. 11 more than anybody else. And I do think he's a cheater, and I don't like him, but I felt like I couldn't leave him off the list. I probably could have put him down lower than I did, and I will see if he shows up on your list at all, because I know we all probably agree that we hate him in a lot of ways. And I don't like him, his personality at all. I think he's, it's easy when you're winning to act like that. If he was losing, he'd have been out of a job long, long time ago. And I think we'll see this year, I'll have to put this in there to say that you get to see this season that Tom Brady was a great quarterback independent of Bill Belichick, but I'm not sure that Bill Belichick is quite as great independently of Tom Brady. But that said, even with a great quarterback, you got to do a lot of other things to be successful, and you got to do a lot of other things to win. And so, there you go.
Well, Bill Belichick is my 3 as well.
Wow.
And
I'm
surprised by that.
I'm surprised.
I can't stand the guy either, or whatever. But you can't, even with the cheating, and I completely agree. He took a Super Bowl from our birds, basically, as far as I'm concerned, by cheating. But anyhow, I don't really like the guy, but you can't argue with success, and he's had longevity and success, both. So I just didn't, the 6 for 9 in Super Bowls or whatever I think it is. I put down he might even been higher on my list if it wouldn't have been for what I consider to be that he cheated the game. One thing I wrote down for Bill Belichick is I think part of his success is getting guys to realize, and especially in football, because it's a team game hugely, is just doing your job, not trying to do someone else's job while you're, especially on defense, just doing your job. Your job is to stop the A gap or whatever, just doing your job. And I think he gets guys to buy into that. And that's why even without star players on defense, his defenses for the most part have been decent enough to allow Brady to
and he has had some pretty colorful personalities that he's managed to get underneath his umbrella of teamwork and all those kinds of things. So whatever he's doing behind the scenes, in addition to the cheating, is working, and you got to give him credit for that. So for sure. Yeah.
Well, I will say that he is not my 3, and he's not in my top 5. I had him in honorable mention because I could not put him there. But I look at a lot of the other things besides having Tom Brady. His division was terrible. They basically, again, I would just listen on the radio. They were actually talking about that and how, he basically had, not basically, I think he did have home playoff games because of the division champ. And, they never were, because I think Tom Brady played in his first wild card game. That was his first wild card game, because all his games were because So I look at some of that as being the bad division. But anyway, my number 3, I had to go old school, but again, just because he's got a lot of it, and is George Halas from the Bears. Again, longevity. I mean, the guy had 318 wins, 148 losses. He's number 2 all time with wins. He had 6 championships. Obviously, it was before the Super Bowl. But the one thing that I was really impressed with is that he won 4 championships in 4 different decades.
Yes.
So, talking about
First one was in like the 20s.
So
the
yeah,
last one was in the 60s or
it's
something.
just crazy to think, and of course he's a Hall of Famer. So I have George Halas as my number 3.
All right. Well, my number 2 is Don Shula. So again, longevity, 33 years. And I'll be honest, didn't realize some of those years were with the Colts.
Yeah.
And then, the Dolphins, of course. So 6 Super Bowl appearances, Super Bowl champ twice. Only team to ever be perfect and have a perfect undefeated season. If it was just that, he wouldn't necessarily be number 2. But that longevity of years of successful coaching, and look what happened since he's not there. How they haven't really been relevant since, really, for the most part. His win percentage, because I did the math on him, is not quite as good. But 328, 156, and 6. And I actually just noticed him now mistaken my math. So I won't give you what my percentage was because I realized I made a mistake in my math. But, still, pretty impressive record, 328 wins. And I had all-time career wins leader down as one of the statistics as well. So, Don Shula, number 2.
Don Shula is my number 2 as well. And I don't know if I may have mentioned to you guys before, you may remember or whatever, that growing up, I grew up in the middle of the state, so I didn't really, it wasn't like I was a Birds fan or a Steelers fan growing up. And so my household was Jets fans because that's what someone was
on
in
the
my
TV,
household.
right?
So, of course, as kids do, I rooted the opposite, which was the Dolphins at the time. And of course, I'm older than you guys, and so right around the time that's when they started being successful. So I was a Dolphins fan growing up. So I love Don Shula. As much as I hated Bill Belichick and still do, I love Don Shula or whatever. So all-time wins leader at 347. One thing the drawback for him is only 2 of 6 in the Super Bowls. He made it to 6 of them, but he only won 2 of them or whatever.
Yeah.
And one of them being the Joe Namath win, the Jets, whatever, and the other one of the other ones being where he got smoked when they had Marino or whatever, and they had the best offense, and they got smoked by the 49ers or whatever. So, yeah. But anyhow, so Shula's my number 2 as well.
Well, I was going to say, Shula's my number 2, and I'm sure our number 1's going to be the same. But yeah, I was going to say, and the other thing, think about it, it's kind of surprising he didn't win, with Marino.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's all the same stuff that you guys said. I always think about, and I don't remember the players' names, but they always toast when the final NFL team loses their first game of the
Larry
undefeated.
Zonka,
Yes.
those guys.
Yes. So, but yes, Don Shula is my number 2.
So that leads us to our number 1. So I'm guessing we're gonna probably have the same because there's no way this guy doesn't make your list of top 5,
Right.
and no one's named him yet, and that's Vince Lombardi. So Green Bay Packers, Washington, for which I didn't realize till doing some research, 70.5% wins. So he's got a high winning percentage. And let's see. So he's got 3 NFL championships. Super Bowl 1, Super Bowl 2, Hall of Fame, of course, and something, again, I didn't know because he was kind of before my time, but the question mark would be, how much more would he have done? He died young because of cancer. So because of that, his career was not quite as long as some others, and that question is there. But, just a phenomenal coach who did, the trophy's named after him. So,
Just say, you're gonna take all,
how much
I'm
better
gonna
do
have
you
nothing
get?
left to say probably, but
Yeah,
that's all right.
Right. Well, I don't know. Maybe I looked it up different, but I thought he won 5 NFL titles, 2 Super Bowls, and 3 other.
Well,
Yeah,
I was
that's
I-
right. 3 Super
he
Bowls
said
and
three-
3
okay, he did,
three
okay.
NFL championships and 2 Super Bowls.
I,
So
was,
total of
I
5.
actually wrote 5 in 7
7
years.
years. That's what I wrote.
So,
Too. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah. So but colon cancer. I mean, today.
How old was he? Like, that's
I don't know.
Okay.
I didn't.
Did you think-
I don't know that I have that written down. Just that he died young.
I don't think he was very old. In other words, I don't think he was planning on retiring anytime soon when he got.
Well,
colon
especially when you
cancer
think
or
about the
whatever.
coaches that are today. I mean, 70 years old, so.
Right. So imagine what he would have done
Right.
for Washington if
Yeah.
whatever. But yeah, the win percentage is huge. I mean, it's not a long duration, but that's obviously wasn't his fault, you know.
Right.
Just it's the way it was or whatever. But yeah, he by far is the number one.
Well, I was gonna say. Well, I wrote down one thing that's different than yours. One is 9-1 postseason record, and the other thing I wrote down, and something I read, is that he was a master of motivating players. They said that. I mean, think about if you just think of coaches in general sports,
Yeah.
you're gonna say Vince Lombardi.
Yeah.
You know, for
All time of all sports.
okay.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
there's a ton of great quotes attributed to Vince Lombardi
Right.
that are
Like I said, the
motivational coaching.
trophies named
philosophy.
after him. So what else can you say? So.
So I did have a couple honorable mentions
Go
that
ahead.
we didn't mention, so I'll put them out there. One, really just two honorable mentions I had. One is Bill Parcells. And, he had a 19-year career, Hall of Famer, 11-8 in the playoffs, 5 division titles, 2-time Super Bowl champ. A lot of different teams, Giants, Patriots, Jets, Cowboys. So I just thought he was worthy of that given his, his career. And my other honorable mention I have to put in there, and not just because I'm a homer, but maybe a little bit, is Andy Reid. And I know his career isn't over yet, but you look at the 21 seasons, and he's had so much success with 2 different teams, and maybe we'll win another Super Bowl here this year. And if not this year, he has the possibility in coming years. And I think in Philadelphia, Andy Reid doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion, for how great a coach he is to take teams, and really move them for a long period of time. I mean, he coached the Eagles for 15 seasons? That is unheard of for a lot of guys unless you're successful. They don't keep you around. I mean, they fired Doug Peterson in 3 years here in Philadelphia, and he won the Super Bowl. I mean, I think so. Andy Reid's numbers are going to bear out a Hall of Fame career, and I had to add him as an honorable mention.
Go ahead.
So, so I had Hallis as an honorable mention. I had Parcells as an honorable mention. A couple things with Hallis. I noted apparently he was the first to conduct film study sessions or whatever. That's
Okay.
I mean that's
Yeah,
pretty.
that's
I mean,
definitely
that's
big.
back in the day because
Yes.
he last championship
Now
was
it's all
in
it is.
'63 or whatever. Yeah, now it's right. Parcells, the one thing I noted was he was the first coach to lead 4 different franchises to the playoffs. Someone might have done it since then, but he was the first, I understand. Joe Gibbs, who you had your top five.
Yep, he was my 5.
The 3 different starting QBs, and then the only other honorable mention I have was Tom Landry, he might actually made even 5 or so on my list, or been right there or whatever. But 2 for 5 in Super Bowls.
And he coached the Cowboys.
And he coached, right.
So that kept him kind
Right,
of.
so no matter whether I was as a Dolphins fan or as a Birds fan now,
Yeah.
Tom Landry is hated.
Right.
But 20 straight seasons with a winning record, Tom
Yeah.
Landry had. I don't think that'll ever be touched.
That's.
I was gonna say
hard to do.
I put Tom Landry
Andy
on.
Reid.
Is he?
I would have to check it, but there's a pretty good chance. I mean,
Birds
think
have
about.
one in there, a losing season in there or not?
I can
Yeah,
not.
it's a good- that's a good question.
It's worth looking
Yeah,
up. maybe.
definitely
Yeah.
worth
So if
looking
you're
up.
listening out there,
Yeah.
you can look that one up.
I put Tom Landry 2. He was number 4 all time in wins. And the one thing you think of Tom Landry is the hat and the
Oh,
dress. I wrote another guy down. Again, an old timer was Paul Brown. He was number 6 all time in wins. If you think about this, though, okay, if you just redo the top 5 and then we did a couple honorable mentions, think about these coaches. They're all NFC East coaches. No wonder the Eagles haven't won.
Yeah, right.
I mean, seriously, look, the Cowboys, the Giants, the Redskins,
Landry,
they all have
Gibbs, Parcells.
they all had number,
Yep.
all timers.
Yep.
And we don't, maybe Andy Reid, but he wasn't that win for us. But think about that. I mean,
Yep.
all these guys, and you got the 49ers, which was NFC.
Yep.
You got Green Bay, which is NFC. You got the Bears, NFC. So
Yep.
Well, when you think about how bad the NFC East was this year, but yeah, you're totally right. There's a lot of history there in those teams that has been historical power. I mean, for years, you said the Redskins, the Cowboys,
The Giants.
the
Yeah,
Giants.
winning.
Those guys were all in it. So yeah, definitely a lot more going on there, which leads to your earlier point about Belichick as well. So. All right, well, I think that's it. There we go. That's our top NFL coaches of all time. You have been listening and watching the 2 Matt and a Jeff podcast. We will see you next time.